When a racist woman humiliates a black mom at her daughter's school, she thinks she's put her in her place. But things take an unexpected turn when the truth is revealed. The woman she shamed isn't just a parent, but the school's new principal. What happens next will leave everyone stunned. What would you do if you were in Aisha's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal the unexpected. It all started on a crisp Monday morning, the kind of morning filled with the buzz of parents chatting and kids scurrying to make it to class on time. The school parking lot was a flurry of activity, with minivans unloading children and parents exchanging brief goodbyes. In the middle of it all, Aisha stepped out of her car, her daughter Zoe's hand in hers, both of them ready to face their first day at this new school. Aisha held Zoe's tiny hand as they walked toward the entrance, her heart steady but her senses sharp. Moving to a new district wasn't just about finding a good school. It was about giving Zoe the best chance to grow, surrounded by opportunity. She had done her research, and this place, with its high academic standards and active parent community, felt like the perfect fit. But perfection, Aisha knew, was often an illusion. As they made their way across the lot, Aisha noticed the stares, brief but telling. She felt the familiar weight of judgment that came with being a black woman in spaces where people like her weren't always expected to be. She ignored it, focusing instead on Zoe's excitement. This was about her daughter, not the opinions of strangers. Then it happened. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The voice was sharp and laced with condescension. Aisha turned to see a woman standing near an SUV, arms crossed, her gaze fixed on Aisha and Zoe as though they were out of place. The woman, Karen, looked them over with a smirk that didn't hide her assumptions. "This school isn't exactly for everyone," Karen added, her words as pointed as daggers wrapped in a thin smile. Aisha's expression didn't falter. She had faced women like Karen before, self-appointed gatekeepers of social spaces, quick to decide who did or didn't belong. The kind of people who believed in invisible walls separating them from others. "We're exactly where we need to be," Aisha replied calmly, squeezing Zoe's hand just a little tighter. Karen's smirk widened. "I'm sure," she said with a laugh that wasn't friendly. She glanced down at Zoe, as if even the child needed to be put in her place. Zoe tugged on Aisha's hand, whispering, "Mom, can we just go?" Aisha leaned down, her voice warm and steady. "Yes, baby. Let's go inside." She stood back up, gave Karen a look that was neither angry nor submissive, just steady, and walked on without another word. Karen's eyes followed them, her expression unreadable but clearly unsettled. Aisha didn't look back, though she felt the weight of Karen's gaze long after they stepped inside the building. Inside, Zoe gave her mother a worried glance. "Why didn't you tell her?" she whispered. Aisha smiled gently. "Because she doesn't need to know who we are to treat us with respect." And with that, they walked deeper into the halls of the school, where their story, this new beginning, was only just unfolding. The following morning, the school parking lot was once again buzzing with parents and children, though the air felt slightly different to Aisha. She could sense eyes on her as she walked Zoe to class, though most of the glances were fleeting. She held Zoe's hand a little tighter, knowing full well that first impressions often lingered, especially when rooted in prejudice. Karen, however, had not forgotten their encounter. She stood by her SUV again, chatting with two other mothers, her voice loud enough to carry across the parking lot. Aisha knew immediately they were talking about her. "Oh, I just wonder how some people manage to enroll their kids here," Karen said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "There are scholarships, I suppose." The other women chuckled uneasily, unsure how far they should indulge her. Karen noticed Aisha approaching and gave her a smile that was more of a sneer, her eyes narrowing. "Look who's back," Karen called out, as if Aisha were part of an ongoing joke. "Nice to see you again. Getting comfortable already?" Aisha stopped but didn't respond right away, carefully considering her next step. Karen's condescending tone and thinly veiled insults were designed to provoke her, but Aisha knew better than to play into such games. "Yes," Aisha replied with a calm smile. "We're settling in just fine. Thanks for asking." Karen wasn't satisfied with the polite response. She took a step closer, placing herself between Aisha and the entrance as if she owned the space. "You know," Karen said loudly, "this school isn't exactly for everyone. We have certain expectations here." She let the word hang in the air for a moment, glancing toward the other mothers, who exchanged awkward looks but said nothing. Aisha's face remained composed, though inside she felt a flicker of anger. It wasn't the first time she had faced this kind of subtle racism, the kind that came wrapped in politeness, but stung just the same. Karen leaned in slightly. "We'd just like to keep things, high quality here." Zoe tugged on Aisha's hand, whispering, "Mom, can we go inside now?" Aisha knelt down and kissed Zoe's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, let's go." Then, standing back up, she looked Karen squarely in the eyes. "You have a nice day now," Aisha said smoothly, sidestepping the woman and continuing toward the entrance. Karen stood there, stunned for a moment, as if she couldn't believe Aisha hadn't taken the bait. "Some people just don't know when they're out of their depth," Karen muttered loudly, ensuring Aisha would hear her. Aisha didn't stop or turn around. Zoe needed her to be the bigger person right now, and she had no intention of ruining her daughter's day. But Karen wasn't finished. Inside the school, the morning routine carried on as usual, with children rushing to their classrooms and parents lingering in the hallways. Aisha chatted briefly with one of the teachers, checking in on Zoe's progress and confirming pickup arrangements for the afternoon. She was just about to leave when she heard Karen's voice again, this time from farther down the hall. "There she is," Karen said with mock enthusiasm, as if Aisha were some kind of novelty item on display. "You must be, what, the new school volunteer? Or do you do the lunch shifts?" Aisha turned slowly, her patience wearing thin but her expression still neutral. "Actually, I'm Zoe's mother," she said simply. Karen gave an exaggerated look of surprise, her eyes wide with false curiosity. "Oh, really? Well, I just assumed." She let the sentence dangle, leaving it open for interpretation, her meaning painfully clear to everyone within earshot. One of the teachers nearby shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed by the conversation but unsure how to intervene. Karen continued with a sly smile. "I mean, it's not exactly common to see, well, She gestured vaguely, as if Aisha's presence was somehow out of place in the well-to-do environment of the school. Aisha held Karen's gaze for a moment, weighing her options. She could respond with anger, justifiably so, but that wouldn't solve anything. Or she could respond with the grace and composure she had always tried to model for Zoe. "You assumed incorrectly," Aisha said calmly, "but I guess we all make mistakes." Karen gave a tight, forced smile, clearly frustrated by Aisha's refusal to engage in the way she had hoped. "Well," Karen said, her voice thick with condescension, "I just hope your daughter is ready for a challenging environment." Aisha raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Zoe squeezed her mother's hand again, her young face tight with worry. "Come on, baby," Aisha said softly to Zoe. "Let's go. We don't have to waste our time here." They continued down the hall toward the exit, leaving Karen standing in the middle of the corridor, fuming. The other parents and teachers exchanged glances but said nothing, unwilling to challenge Karen directly. Later that afternoon, Aisha returned to pick Zoe up. She noticed Karen again, standing with a group of parents in the parking lot, gossiping animatedly. Aisha could hear snippets of their conversation as she approached. "She must be one of those parents trying to move up in the world," Karen said, her voice loud enough to carry. "Probably doesn't even live in the district. You know how some people are." Aisha clenched her jaw but kept walking, her head held high. She knew better than to react. Zoe needed her to be calm, collected, and above all a role model for how to handle situations like this with dignity. "Mom," Zoe asked quietly as they got into the car, "why does that lady keep saying those things?" Aisha sighed, searching for the right words. Because some people are afraid of things they don't understand, she said gently. But what she thinks doesn't matter, baby. We know who we are, and that's all that counts. Zoe looked out the window, deep in thought. But what if she keeps being mean? Aisha smiled softly. Then we'll keep being ourselves. And sooner or later, people like that learn the hard way that kindness and respect are more powerful than anything they have to say. As they drove away from the school, Aisha couldn't help but think about how often she'd been in situations like this. How often people like Karen felt entitled to judge without knowing a thing about her or her daughter. It was exhausting. But she knew the best way to fight back was not with anger, but with success. And she had a feeling that Karen's day of reckoning was coming sooner than she thought. The next day, Aisha dropped Zoe off at school again, determined to keep things normal despite the unpleasant interactions with Karen. The school building, though modern and well-maintained, had a warmth to it that Aisha appreciated. Students of all backgrounds ran through the halls, chatting and laughing, while teachers stood by their doors, greeting the children as they entered. Zoe ran ahead toward her classroom, her little feet pattering down the hall. She waved at Aisha before disappearing through the door, her smile brighter today than it had been the day before. It gave Aisha a sense of peace, knowing Zoe was beginning to settle in, but she remained observant. This was a good school, but it wasn't perfect. As Aisha made her way through the building, she passed teachers huddled in quiet conversation. Some smiled as she walked by, others gave polite nods, though she noticed one or two quick glances exchanged between staff, curious, but not hostile. Aisha was used to this. She knew how people often observed her, trying to place her into a box that made sense to them. She stopped in front of a large bulletin board in the hallway. Bright, colorful displays filled the space, announcing events like Multicultural Day and Family Game Night. There were also framed photos of smiling students participating in various activities, sports teams, art projects, and class trips. Aisha appreciated the school's efforts to promote diversity and community, though she wondered how much of that was real and how much was for show. She moved further down the hall, glancing into classrooms as she passed. Some teachers were already leading their students in morning activities. In one room, children sat cross-legged on the floor while their teacher read a story aloud. In another, students were busy working on group projects, chattering excitedly. Aisha smiled to herself. There was something magical about the energy in a school, a sense of possibility that couldn't be found anywhere else. It reminded her of why she had chosen education as a career, being part of children's growth, helping them discover their potential. It was more than a job to her. It was a calling. She continued down the corridor and noticed a familiar face, Ms. Howard, the school's friendly receptionist, who was busy sorting through a stack of paperwork at the front desk. "Good morning, Ms. Howard," Aisha greeted warmly. Ms. Howard looked up, her face brightening. "Good morning. How are you today, Ms. Aisha?" "Doing well, thank you," Aisha replied. "Just getting a feel for the place." Ms. Howard gave her a knowing smile. "It takes a little time, but you'll find it's a wonderful school. The kids are great, and most of the parents are too." Aisha nodded, appreciating the subtle but honest emphasis on most. It was clear that even the staff had their share of challenges dealing with certain parents, likely including Karen. "Let me know if you need anything," Ms. Howard added. "We're happy to have you here." Aisha moved on to the teacher's lounge, curious to get a sense of the faculty dynamic. Inside, a small group of teachers sat around a table, sipping coffee and chatting. They quieted slightly when Aisha entered, as if they weren't quite sure how to interact with her. "Hi," Aisha said, offering a polite smile as she grabbed a cup of water from the counter. One of the teachers, a middle-aged woman with curly hair and glasses, smiled back. "Hello there. You're Zoe's mom, right?" "I teach first grade. Mrs. Green." "Yes, that's right," Aisha replied. "Zoe's really excited about starting school here." Another teacher, a younger man with a casual demeanor, chimed in. "She'll do great. It's a good group of kids this year." Aisha could feel the subtle undercurrent of curiosity in their voices. They were friendly enough, but there was still a sense that they were trying to figure her out, where she fit in, what kind of parent she was. It was a familiar experience. "I'm Mrs. Clark," another teacher introduced herself with a warm smile. "We have a lot of great events throughout the year. The kids love the spring carnival and the family nights. You'll see, it's a tight-knit community." Aisha nodded, filing away the information. "It seems like a really positive environment," she said diplomatically, though she knew from experience that surface appearances could be deceiving. As the conversation continued, the teachers began discussing upcoming activities and school events. Aisha listened carefully, making mental notes about the school's culture. It was clear that most of the staff genuinely cared about their students, but she also sensed subtle hierarchies, unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. Outside the teacher's lounge, Aisha heard familiar voices echoing from the hallway. Karen was standing near the front office, chatting with another parent in her usual loud, self-assured tone. I just don't understand why they let just anyone enroll here," Karen was saying, her voice laced with condescension. "It really waters down the quality, if you ask me." Aisha paused in the doorway, out of sight but well within earshot. The other parent murmured something in response, but Karen continued unabated. "This school used to be known for its high standards," Karen said dramatically. "Now it feels like they're just letting anyone in, no questions asked." Aisha felt a tight knot of frustration in her chest but remained still, unwilling to give Karen the satisfaction of knowing she was listening. Instead, she focused on what she could learn from the conversation. It was clear that Karen saw herself as someone with influence in the school, a self-appointed gatekeeper of sorts, determined to decide who belonged and who didn't. Aisha also noticed that the other parent didn't challenge Karen's remarks, though there was a distinct discomfort in her tone. It was a pattern Aisha had seen many times before, people who knew better but stayed silent to avoid confrontation. Later that day, Aisha stopped by Zoe's classroom to check in with her teacher, Mrs. Taylor. The classroom was bright and colorful, with posters of books and educational themes covering the walls. Zoe was sitting at her desk, happily coloring a worksheet with two other children. "How's Zoe doing?" Aisha asked quietly as Mrs. Taylor greeted her at the door. "She's doing great," Mrs. Taylor replied warmly. "She's already made a couple of friends and she's really engaged in the activities." Aisha smiled, relieved to hear the positive feedback. "I'm so glad to hear that." "She's a joy to have in class," Mrs. Taylor added. "I think she's going to do really well here." Aisha glanced over at Zoe, who looked up and gave her mother a bright smile before returning to her coloring. In that moment, Aisha felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Despite the challenges, Zoe was thriving. This was the environment she had wanted for her daughter, a place where she could learn, grow, and be herself. As Aisha prepared to leave for the day, she once again encountered Karen in the parking lot. Karen was standing near her SUV, speaking to a small group of parents, her voice as loud and judgmental as ever. "Well, I guess some people just can't take a hint," Karen said, her eyes flickering toward Aisha as she walked past. Aisha met Karen's gaze briefly but said nothing, her expression calm and unbothered. She wasn't going to give Karen the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she smiled quietly to herself as she reached her car, knowing full well that Karen's assumptions were about to be shattered. Because soon enough, everyone would know exactly who Aisha was, and Karen's reign as the self-proclaimed gatekeeper of the school would come to an end. The following morning, the school parking lot was once again buzzing with parents and children, though the air felt slightly different to Aisha. She could sense eyes on her as she walked Zoe to class, though most of the glances were fleeting. She held Zoe's hand a little tighter, knowing full well that first impressions often lingered, especially when rooted in prejudice. Karen, however, had not forgotten their encounter. She stood by her SUV again, chatting with two other mothers, her voice loud enough to carry across the parking lot. Aisha knew immediately they were talking about her. "Oh, I just wonder how some people manage to enroll their kids here," Karen said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "There are scholarships, I suppose." The other women chuckled uneasily. unsure how far they should indulge her. Karen noticed Aisha approaching and gave her a smile that was more of a sneer, her eyes narrowing. "Look who's back," Karen called out, as if Aisha were part of an ongoing joke. "Nice to see you again. Getting comfortable already?" Aisha stopped, but didn't respond right away, carefully considering her next step. Karen's condescending tone and thinly veiled insults were designed to provoke her, but Aisha knew better than to play into such games. "Yes," Aisha replied with a calm smile. "We're settling in just fine. Thanks for asking." Karen wasn't satisfied with the polite response. She took a step closer, placing herself between Aisha and the entrance, as if she owned the space. "You know," Karen said loudly, "this school isn't exactly for everyone. We have certain expectations here." She let the word hang in the air for a moment, glancing toward the other mothers, who exchanged awkward looks, but said nothing. Aisha's face remained composed, though inside she felt a flicker of anger. It wasn't the first time she had faced this kind of subtle racism, the kind that came wrapped in politeness but stung just the same. Karen leaned in slightly. "We just like to keep things, high quality here." Zoe tugged on Aisha's hand, whispering, "Mom, can we go inside now?" Aisha knelt down and kissed Zoe's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, let's go." Then, standing back up, she looked Karen squarely in the eyes. "You have a nice day now," Aisha said smoothly, sidestepping the woman and continuing toward the entrance. Karen stood there, stunned for a moment, as if she couldn't believe Aisha hadn't taken the bait. "Some people just don't know when they're out of their depth," Karen muttered loudly, ensuring Aisha would hear her. Aisha didn't stop or turn around. Zoe needed her to be the bigger person right now, and she had no intention of ruining her daughter's day. But Karen wasn't finished. Inside the school, the morning routine carried on as usual, with children rushing to their classrooms and parents lingering in the hallways. Aisha chatted briefly with one of the teachers, checking in on Zoe's progress and confirming pickup arrangements for the afternoon. She was just about to leave when she heard Karen's voice again, this time from farther down the hall. "There she is," Karen said with mock enthusiasm, as if Aisha were some kind of novelty item on display. "You must be—" "What? The new school volunteer? Or do you do the lunch shifts?" Aisha turned slowly, her patience wearing thin but her expression still neutral. "Actually, I'm Zoe's mother," she said simply. Karen gave an exaggerated look of surprise, her eyes wide with false curiosity. "Oh, really? Well, I just assumed." She let the sentence dangle, leaving it open for interpretation, her meaning painfully clear to everyone within earshot. One of the teachers nearby shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed by the conversation but unsure how to intervene. Karen continued with a sly smile. "I mean, it's not exactly common to see, well, She gestured vaguely, as if Aisha's presence was somehow out of place in the well-to-do environment of the school. Aisha held Karen's gaze for a moment, weighing her options. She could respond with anger, justifiably so, but that wouldn't solve anything. Or she could respond with the grace and composure she had always tried to model for Zoe. "You assumed incorrectly," Aisha said calmly. "But I guess we all make mistakes." Karen gave a tight, forced smile, clearly frustrated by Aisha's refusal to engage in the way she had hoped. "Well," Karen said, her voice thick with condescension, "I just hope your daughter is ready for a challenging environment." Aisha raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Zoe squeezed her mother's hand again, her young face tight with worry. "Come on, baby," Aisha said softly to Zoe. "Let's go. We don't have to waste our time here." They continued down the hall toward the exit, leaving Karen standing in the middle of the corridor, fuming. The other parents and teachers exchanged glances but said nothing, unwilling to challenge Karen directly. Later that afternoon, Aisha returned to pick Zoe up. She noticed Karen again, standing with a group of parents in the parking lot, gossiping animatedly. Aisha could hear snippets of their conversation as she approached. "She must be one of those parents trying to move up in the world," Karen said, her voice loud enough to carry. probably doesn't even live in the district. You know how some people are." Aisha clenched her jaw but kept walking, her head held high. She knew better than to react. Zoe needed her to be calm, collected, and above all, a role model for how to handle situations like this, with dignity. "Mom," Zoe asked quietly as they got into the car, "why does that lady keep saying those things?" Aisha sighed, searching for the right words. "Because some people are afraid of things they don't understand," she said gently. "But what she thinks doesn't matter, baby. We know who we are, and that's all that counts." Zoe looked out the window, deep in thought. "But what if she keeps being mean?" Aisha smiled softly. "Then we'll keep being ourselves. And sooner or later, people like that learn the hard way, that kindness and respect are more powerful than anything they have to say." As they drove away from the school, Aisha couldn't help but think about how often she'd been in situations like this, how often people like Karen felt entitled to judge without knowing a thing about her or her daughter. It was exhausting, but she knew the best way to fight back was not with anger, but with success, and she had a feeling that Karen's day of reckoning was coming sooner than she thought. A few days later, the rhythm of the school had started to settle. Aisha dropped Zoe off each morning, exchanged polite smiles with teachers and staff, and quietly observed the undercurrents of behavior among the parents. Zoe seemed happier with each passing day, making new friends and becoming comfortable in her new environment. But despite Aisha's calm exterior, she knew Karen was still watching, judging from the sidelines, waiting for an opportunity to assert her dominance again. Karen's disapproval was evident every time their paths crossed. Whether it was in the parking lot, the school hallway, or during pickup time, Karen never missed a chance to make a remark designed to belittle Aisha's presence. "Oh, still hanging around?" Karen called out one afternoon as Aisha picked Zoe up from school. "I thought the PTA only needed volunteers for special events." Aisha ignored the comment, as she had done many times before, but Karen wasn't finished. She thrived on getting reactions from people, especially those she saw as beneath her. Later that evening, Aisha overheard a conversation as she walked past a group of parents gathered near the school entrance. Karen's voice carried over the murmur of conversation like a loudspeaker. "I mean, we all know why some people send their kids here, right?" Karen said, smirking as if she had just shared a clever secret. "They're just looking for handouts. They want their kids to benefit from what we worked hard for." The other parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one said a word to challenge Karen. Aisha knew the type all too well. Karen wasn't just making casual remarks. She was planting seeds, hoping to rally other parents against her imagined enemy. Karen saw herself as a protector of some imagined purity, guarding the school from anyone she deemed unworthy. "Do we even know if she lives in the district?" Karen continued with a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for Aisha to catch. "These days, you never know where people really come from." Over the next few days, Karen escalated her efforts. Whenever Aisha passed through the hallways, Karen would make a point of gathering other parents around her, making passive-aggressive comments designed to alienate Aisha. "She looks very comfortable here, doesn't she?" Karen would say to the others. "Must be nice." Karen's words dripped with assumptions, but none of the parents dared to speak against her openly. Many of them likely knew better, but standing up to Karen was a risk most weren't willing to take. Her influence was subtle but undeniable, a force that kept people in line through passive aggression and fear of being ostracized. Aisha, however, remained unfazed. She carried herself with the same quiet dignity that had always defined her. She refused to let Karen's words affect her outwardly, though inside she was growing increasingly frustrated. This wasn't just about her. It was about the example she was setting for Zoe. She had to show her daughter that dignity and self-respect were more powerful than pettiness and hate. One morning, as Aisha walked Zoe to her classroom, she noticed Karen lingering in the hallway, chatting with one of the teachers. Karen glanced over at Aisha with a sly grin, as if she were plotting something. Have you heard anything about her?" Karen asked the teacher, her voice deliberately loud enough for Aisha to hear. "I mean, it's not every day you see people like that in a place like this. Makes you wonder, doesn't it?" The teacher looked visibly uncomfortable, but didn't respond. Karen smiled triumphantly, as if her silence was an agreement. Aisha's fists clenched at her sides, but she remained silent, knowing that a confrontation wouldn't solve anything. She knew Karen's type too well, people who relied on others' silence to validate their prejudice. But Aisha also knew that the truth would soon come out, and Karen's assumptions would crumble. Karen's behavior escalated even further at the PTA meeting later that week. The parents gathered in the school's multipurpose room, chatting casually before the meeting began. Karen, of course, made sure to position herself at the center of attention, surrounded by her usual group of supporters. When Aisha arrived, Karen gave her a long, dismissive glance as if questioning her right to be there. "Oh, I didn't realize you'd be attending," Karen said with mock surprise. "Are you new to the PTA or just visiting?" "I'm here for the meeting," Aisha replied evenly, taking a seat near the front of the room. Karen smirked but said nothing more, clearly assuming that Aisha was just another parent looking to volunteer for minor tasks. As the meeting began, Karen dominated the conversation, speaking over other parents and dismissing their suggestions with patronizing remarks. "Well, I think we should stick to what's worked in the past," Karen said dismissively when another parent suggested new fundraising ideas. "We don't want to complicate things." Aisha watched silently, observing Karen's behavior with growing amusement. Karen's sense of control over the school's social dynamics was obvious, but it was built on a foundation of assumptions, and those assumptions were about to be shattered. By the end of the week, Karen had fully embraced her campaign against Aisha. She spread rumors to anyone who would listen, insisting that Aisha was taking advantage of the system and didn't belong in their school community. "I'm just saying," Karen whispered to a group of mothers during drop-off one morning. "There's a reason we have zoning laws. Some people think they can just walk in and take whatever they want." Aisha overheard the comment but didn't react. She knew that Karen's words were carefully chosen to wound, to make her feel small. But Aisha had no intention of giving Karen that power. Instead, she smiled to herself, knowing that the truth was about to come out, and Karen wouldn't know what hit her. What Karen didn't know, and what no one else had guessed, was that Aisha wasn't just any parent. She wasn't at the school to volunteer or attend PTA meetings out of boredom. Aisha was there for a much bigger reason. The following week, the school was set to introduce its new principal. The announcement had been made weeks earlier, though the identity of the new leader had been kept under wraps. There had been plenty of speculation among parents and staff, and Karen had eagerly contributed her own theories. "I heard it's someone from the district office," Karen had told a group of parents. "Probably someone who thinks they can come in here and change everything. We'll see how long that lasts." Karen's smugness was almost comical, but Aisha remained patient. She knew that soon enough everyone would see the truth, including Karen. And when the day came, Aisha planned to handle it with the same grace and dignity she had shown all along. Because Aisha knew that people like Karen relied on their false sense of control, on their ability to manipulate others through assumptions and prejudice. But once the truth was revealed, that control would disappear, and the look on Karen's face when she realized the truth, that would be priceless. The day had finally arrived, the long-awaited announcement of the new principal. The school buzzed with anticipation as staff, teachers, and parents gathered in the auditorium. The stage was set with neat rows of chairs and a podium adorned with the school's crest. A large banner hung above the stage, reading, "Welcome, our new principal." The air was filled with curiosity and excitement. Teachers whispered to one another, speculating on who the new principal might be. Parents shuffled in their seats, some chatting casually, while others scrolled through their phones. Among them, Karen sat front and center, eager to make her presence known. She was seated with her usual circle of supporters, ready to stake her claim as a key player in whatever social dynamics would unfold under the new leadership. "I heard it's someone from the district office," Karen whispered to one of her friends. "Hopefully someone who understands how things work around here." Karen crossed her legs and folded her arms, scanning the room for familiar faces. She spotted Aisha sitting a few rows back, calm and composed, her hands resting in her lap. Karen's lip curled in disdain. It irked her that Aisha seemed so unbothered by everything, so unaffected by Karen's subtle campaign of judgment and exclusion. "Still hanging around," Karen muttered under her breath. "We'll see how long that lasts." Her friend gave a small, nervous laugh, clearly uncertain about how to respond. Karen relished these moments, the ones where she felt in control, certain that everyone in the room knew their place. But Karen's confidence was about to be shattered. The room quieted as the school's assistant principal, Mr. Collins, stepped up to the podium. He adjusted the microphone and smiled warmly at the crowd. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "Thank you all for being here today. We are excited to introduce the new principal of our school, someone who brings a wealth of experience, passion, and a commitment to building a community where every student and parent feels valued." Karen leaned forward in her seat, her interest piqued. She exchanged a smug glance with one of her friends, already preparing to evaluate the new principal through her usual lens of judgment. Mr. Collins continued, "Our new principal has a long history of leadership in education, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and academic excellence. We are truly fortunate to have this individual join us." Karen rolled her eyes slightly, already bored by the introduction. "Just get on with it," she whispered impatiently. Mr. Collins smiled and gestured toward the side of the stage. "Everyone, please join me in welcoming our new principal, Mrs. Aisha Thompson." Aisha rose gracefully from her seat in the audience. For a brief moment there was silence, a stunned, collective intake of breath as the realization swept through the room. Parents and teachers exchanged wide-eyed glances, struggling to process what they were seeing. Karen sat frozen, her face a mixture of disbelief and confusion. Aisha walked to the front of the auditorium with the same quiet dignity she had displayed since day one. She climbed the steps to the stage, her steps measured and purposeful, and stood confidently behind the podium. The room remained silent, as if the entire audience had been struck speechless. Aisha smiled calmly, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady and warm. "I am honored to stand before you today as the new principal of this wonderful school." The silence lingered for a few more moments, broken only by the soft sound of shuffling feet and the occasional murmur of disbelief. Karen's face was a portrait of shock, her mouth slightly open as she struggled to make sense of what she was witnessing. Aisha continued, unbothered by the stunned expressions around her. "This school has a strong tradition of academic excellence and community involvement, and I am excited to build on that foundation. My goal is to create a space where every student feels seen, valued, and empowered to reach their full potential." She glanced briefly in Karen's direction, though her expression remained neutral. "As we move forward together, I want to emphasize the importance of respect and kindness, values that will shape everything we do here. This school is not just a place for education, it's a community, and every member of that community matters." The words hung in the air like a subtle challenge, a reminder that no one, not even someone like Karen, was above the values the school stood for. Aisha smiled again. "I look forward to meeting each of you in the coming days and working together to make this school the best it can be." She stepped back from the podium and the room erupted into applause. The teachers clapped enthusiastically, many of them exchanging relieved smiles, clearly pleased with the choice of principal. Even the parents joined in, though some did so hesitantly, still trying to reconcile the woman they had quietly judged with the leader now standing before them. Karen, however, remained motionless, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. The color had drained from her face, replaced by a pale mixture of embarrassment and disbelief. "This can't be," Karen whispered under her breath, barely audible over the applause. She glanced around at the other parents, searching for someone to validate her shock, but all she found were polite smiles and approving nods. Karen's usual circle of supporters avoided her gaze, clearly eager to distance themselves from her now that the social tides had shifted. She sat stiffly in her seat, feeling the weight of her own assumptions pressing down on her like a leaden cloak. For the first time, Karen was truly speechless. As the applause died down, Mr. Collins returned to the podium. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson, for those inspiring words," he said. "We are thrilled to have you here and look forward to the positive changes you'll bring to our school." Aisha stepped down from the stage and began making her way toward the crowd, greeting parents and teachers with warm handshakes and friendly smiles. Karen watched from her seat, frozen in place, unsure whether to stay or flee. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of how everything had changed so quickly. The woman she had dismissed and belittled was now the leader of the very institution she had tried to control, and there was nothing Karen could do about it. As Aisha made her way through the crowd, she eventually reached Karen's row. Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. Karen opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. She stared at Aisha, her expression a mixture of embarrassment, confusion, and a desperate attempt to salvage her dignity. Aisha smiled gently, offering Karen a handshake. "It's nice to see you again," she said, her voice kind but firm. Karen hesitated for a moment, then shook Aisha's hand, her grip weak and uncertain. I didn't realize," Karen stammered, struggling to find the right words. Aisha's smile didn't waver. "No, you didn't," she said softly, her eyes steady. "But now you do." With that, Aisha released Karen's hand and moved on, continuing to greet the other parents with the same grace and professionalism she had shown all along. Karen sat back in her chair, feeling small and exposed. For the first time in a long while, she was completely out of her depth. As Aisha mingled with the crowd, it became clear to everyone present that the dynamics had shifted. The parents who had once flocked to Karen now gravitated toward Aisha, eager to align themselves with the new principal. Teachers and staff, relieved to have a leader who valued respect and inclusion, welcomed Aisha with open arms. Karen sat silently in her chair, watching as the community she had tried to control slipped out of her grasp. The woman she had underestimated had not only risen above her judgment, she had claimed a position of leadership and respect that Karen could never touch. And in that moment, Karen realized that her assumptions had been her greatest weakness. Because Aisha hadn't needed to prove anything to anyone, she had simply been herself, and that had been more than enough. The following week, the shift in dynamics at the school was undeniable. Aisha's presence as the new principal brought a wave of change, both in policies and in attitudes. Teachers, staff, and most parents embraced her leadership, recognizing her vision of building a community rooted in inclusion and respect. However, Karen's earlier behavior hadn't gone unnoticed, and the ripples of those moments lingered, especially for Zoe. Zoe was a bright child, but she was still just 7 years old. Although Aisha had tried to shield her from Karen's comments, the young girl wasn't oblivious to the tension. Children absorb more than adults often realize, and Zoe carried the weight of those encounters quietly. One morning as Aisha braided Zoe's hair before school, she noticed her daughter was unusually quiet. Zoe's normally cheerful chatter had been replaced by a thoughtful silence, her small hands fidgeting with the fabric of her school uniform. "Everything okay, baby?" Aisha asked gently, running her fingers through Zoe's soft curls. Zoe shrugged, her gaze fixed on her lap. "I just don't get it, Mom," she said quietly. "Why was that lady so mean to us? She didn't even know us." Aisha paused, her heart aching for her daughter. She had known this conversation would come, but that didn't make it any easier. "Sometimes people judge others before they even get to know them," Aisha said softly. "It's not fair and it's not right, but it happens." Zoe looked up, her wide eyes filled with confusion. "Is it because we look different?" Aisha nodded slowly. "Yes, baby. Some people are afraid of things that are different from what they're used to. They think that makes them better, but it doesn't." Zoe bit her lip, her small brow furrowed in thought. "But why does it hurt so much?" she whispered. "I didn't even do anything." Aisha felt a lump rise in her throat. She knelt down so she was eye level with Zoe, taking her daughter's hands in her own. "It hurts because it's not fair," Aisha said gently. "And it's okay to feel hurt. But you know what's really important?" Zoe shook her head, her eyes brimming with tears. Aisha smiled softly, brushing a tear from Zoe's cheek. "What matters is that we know who we are, and we don't let anyone else make us feel small. We are strong and we are kind, and no one can take that away from us." Zoe sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Even if they say mean things?" "Even then," Aisha said firmly, "because what other people think of us doesn't change who we are." Later that morning, as Aisha walked Zoe to her classroom, she could see the lingering uncertainty in her daughter's eyes. Zoe clung to her hand a little tighter than usual, her steps slower and more hesitant. When they reached the door, Zoe turned to her mother with a worried expression. "What if the other kids think I don't belong too?" Aisha crouched down, smoothing the collar of Zoe's uniform. "You belong here just as much as anyone else, baby," she said. "And if anyone tries to tell you otherwise, you remind them that the principal of this school believes in you." Zoe gave a small, shy smile, the tension in her tiny shoulders easing just a bit. "Okay, Mom. And remember," Aisha added, brushing a loose curl from Zoe's forehead, "we don't fight mean words with more mean words. We show people who we are with kindness and strength. That's the best way to make a difference." Zoe nodded, her smile growing a little wider. "I'll try." "That's my girl," Aisha whispered, kissing Zoe's forehead. "Now go have an amazing day." That afternoon, during recess, Zoe found herself on the playground with a group of children. She was playing quietly on the swings when two girls approached her. They were classmates she had seen before, though they hadn't spoken much. "Hey," one of the girls said, her tone curious rather than unfriendly. "Is it true your mom is the new principal?" Zoe looked up, her heart fluttering nervously. "Yeah," she said softly. The other girl tilted her head, studying Zoe as if trying to make sense of her. "That's cool," she said finally. "I wish my mom worked at school." Zoe's shoulders relaxed a little. "She's really nice," she offered tentatively. The first girl nodded. "Yeah, my teacher said your mom is going to make the school way better." For the first time in days, Zoe felt a sense of belonging bloom in her chest. The girl's words weren't judgmental or mean. They were simply curious, the way children often are. "You want to play with us?" one of the girls asked, gesturing toward the jungle gym. Zoe smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. "Sure." As she ran off with her new friends, Aisha watched from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. Zoe was finding her way one step at a time. That evening, after Zoe had fallen asleep, Aisha sat on the porch with a cup of tea, reflecting on the day's events. She thought about the conversation with Zoe that morning, the playground encounter, and the many challenges that lay ahead for her daughter. Raising a black child in a world that often judged her by the color of her skin was no easy task. Aisha knew that Zoe would face more moments like the one with Karen, moments that would test her strength and self-worth. But Aisha also knew that these moments would shape Zoe into a resilient, compassionate young woman. As she sipped her tea, Aisha made a silent promise to herself and to Zoe. She would do everything in her power to make sure her daughter knew her worth, no matter what the world tried to tell her. Just as Aisha was lost in thought, the sound of a car door slamming outside pulled her attention. She looked up to see Karen walking toward the house, her expression a mixture of hesitation and forced politeness. Aisha set her cup down and stood, meeting Karen at the front steps. "Evening," she greeted calmly. Karen shifted awkwardly, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I just wanted to talk," she said, her voice unusually quiet. Aisha raised an eyebrow but didn't interrupt, waiting patiently for Karen to continue. "I think I owe you an apology," Karen mumbled, her gaze fixed on the ground. I was out of line and I shouldn't have made those assumptions about you and Zoe." Aisha crossed her arms, studying Karen carefully. The apology was clumsy, but it was a start. "I appreciate the apology," Aisha said finally. "But this isn't just about me or Zoe. It's about how we treat people. Everyone, not just those we think fit a certain mold." Karen nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "You're right," she admitted. "I need to do better." Aisha gave a small, encouraging smile. "We all do." With that, Karen turned and walked back to her car, leaving Aisha standing on the porch, feeling a strange sense of closure. The apology didn't erase the hurt, but it was a step in the right direction. And for Aisha, that was enough. The next morning, Zoe woke up with a sense of excitement she hadn't felt in a long time. As Aisha helped her get ready for school, Zoe grinned up at her mother. "I think today's going to be a good day," Zoe said confidently. Aisha smiled, brushing a final curl into place. "I think so too, baby." And as they walked hand in hand to school, Aisha knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with kindness, strength, and the unshakable belief that they belonged exactly where they were. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at the school began to shift in noticeable ways. Aisha's presence as the new principal was a breath of fresh air, bringing both change and opportunity. The school's tone subtly transformed from one of silent social hierarchies into a more inclusive and open environment. For many parents, Aisha's leadership was a welcome change, but for others, especially Karen, it was a hard pill to swallow. Karen tried at first to maintain her position of influence. She attended every PTA meeting and organized small gatherings with parents, hoping to reassert her control. But something had changed. People were no longer as eager to fall in line. The parents who once gravitated toward her gossip and assumptions now seemed distant, more cautious about aligning themselves with her toxic attitudes. It was clear that Karen was struggling to adjust. Her usual tactics of exclusion no longer held the same weight in a community that was starting to embrace a new kind of leadership, one rooted in kindness, respect, and empathy. Karen's frustration grew as she found herself increasingly isolated. Conversations that once revolved around her opinions and ideas were now centered on Aisha's new initiatives. Parents praised the new programs Aisha had implemented, such as cultural appreciation days and mindfulness workshops for students. At first, Karen tried to dismiss these changes as superficial. "All these new programs are just fluff," she would say to anyone who would listen. "They won't make any real difference." But deep down, Karen knew she was losing her grip. The more she tried to push back against the new wave of openness, the more disconnected she felt from the community she had once controlled. One afternoon, Karen sat alone on a bench near the playground, watching the children play. She observed how easily they interacted with one another, how they didn't care about the differences that adults seemed to obsess over. Zoe was among them, laughing with her friends as they ran across the grass. For the first time in a long while, Karen felt a pang of regret. She had been so focused on maintaining her sense of superiority that she hadn't stopped to consider the impact of her actions. On Aisha, on Zoe, and on the school community as a whole. Meanwhile, under Aisha's leadership, the school was thriving. Teachers felt supported, parents felt heard, and students were flourishing in an environment that celebrated individuality. Aisha introduced new policies that focused on both academic achievement and emotional well-being, emphasizing the importance of empathy and respect. One of the most impactful changes was the launch of a mentorship program, pairing older students with younger ones to foster a sense of community and mutual support. Zoe, excited about the new initiative, was paired with a fifth grader named Mia, who quickly became a role model and friend. The program was a success, and soon students were forming meaningful connections across grade levels. It was exactly the kind of change Aisha had envisioned, a school where every child felt valued and connected. Karen's breaking point came one evening during a PTA event. The room was filled with parents and teachers, all eager to discuss the progress the school had made under Aisha's leadership. Karen sat quietly at the back of the room, listening as parents shared their gratitude for the positive changes. A mother stood up and talked about how the Cultural Appreciation Day had given her daughter the confidence to embrace her heritage. A teacher spoke about the impact of the mindfulness program on her students' behavior and focus. For the first time, Karen saw what she had been blind to before. Aisha wasn't just a principal, she was a leader. She had created a space where everyone felt seen and valued, regardless of their background. And Karen realized with a heavy heart that she had spent so much energy trying to exclude people that she had missed the opportunity to be part of something truly meaningful. The next morning, Karen stood outside the school waiting for Aisha. She felt nervous. Apologies didn't come easily to her, especially not to someone she had treated so unfairly. But she knew it was time to make things right. When Aisha arrived, Karen took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Aisha," she began awkwardly, "I wanted to say, I'm sorry. I was wrong to judge you the way I did. I didn't see the bigger picture." Aisha studied Karen for a moment, her expression calm but unreadable. Then she gave a small, understanding smile. "Thank you, Karen," she said softly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." Karen nodded, feeling both relieved and humbled. I want to do better," she said quietly, "for the school and for myself." Aisha's smile widened. "That's all any of us can do," she replied. "Every day is a new chance to grow." In the weeks that followed, Karen began to change. It wasn't an overnight transformation. Growth rarely is. But she made an effort to be more mindful of her words and actions. She stopped spreading gossip, started listening more, and even volunteered to help with one of the new programs Aisha had introduced. The parents and teachers noticed the change, and slowly Karen began to rebuild some of the relationships she had damaged. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And for the first time in a long time, Karen felt like she was part of the school community, not because she was in control, but because she was contributing in a meaningful way. As Karen's transformation unfolded, Zoe's confidence blossomed. With the mentorship program in full swing and the school's environment becoming more inclusive, Zoe felt more comfortable than ever. One day after school, Zoe ran up to Aisha with a big smile on her face. "Guess what, Mom?" she exclaimed. "We learned about famous women leaders today, and I told the class about you." Aisha's heart swelled with pride. "Oh? And what did you say?" Zoe beamed. "I told them my mom is the best principal ever, and she teaches people how to be kind and strong." Aisha laughed, pulling Zoe into a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she whispered. "And you know what? You're pretty amazing yourself." Zoe giggled, hugging her mother tightly. "I want to be like you when I grow up," she said with conviction. Aisha smiled, her heart full. "You already are, sweetheart." By the end of the school year, the transformation within the community was undeniable. The school had become a place where every child, parent, and teacher felt valued and connected. Karen, once the self-appointed gatekeeper, was now a vocal supporter of Aisha's initiatives. She had learned the hard way that leadership wasn't about control. It was about building bridges and creating spaces where everyone could thrive. And Aisha, through her quiet strength and unwavering kindness, had not only changed the school, but also left a lasting impact on every person she touched. As Aisha and Zoe walked hand in hand through the school gates one morning, Aisha reflected on how far they had come. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it had been worth every challenge. Together, they had faced prejudice, grown stronger, and shown the world that kindness and resilience were more powerful than hate. And this was just the beginning. "Ready for another great day?" Aisha asked, smiling down at Zoe. Zoe grinned. "Always, Mom." With that, they walked toward the school building, side by side, ready to take on whatever came next. In the months that followed, Aisha's leadership left an indelible mark on the school community. From the moment she stepped into the role, She made it clear that every child, teacher, and parent had a place in this new chapter. Her approach wasn't about making sweeping changes overnight, but about fostering small, meaningful transformations that would ripple outward and endure. Aisha's focus was simple: create a space where everyone felt seen, heard, and respected. Her first major initiative was to hold listening sessions with teachers, staff, and parents. She wanted to understand the community's needs, not just what was on the surface, but the challenges that had gone unspoken. During these sessions, Aisha listened attentively, taking notes and engaging in thoughtful conversations. Teachers expressed their frustrations about feeling undervalued, while parents shared concerns about bullying and a lack of inclusivity. For many, it was the first time they felt comfortable speaking openly without fear of judgment or dismissal. "Thank you for trusting me with your thoughts," Aisha said at the end of each session. "This isn't just my school, it's ours, and together we'll make it a place where every child can thrive." One of Aisha's earliest successes was establishing a new culture of inclusion. She introduced a series of diversity workshops for both students and staff, aimed at promoting empathy and understanding. The workshops were hands-on, with activities that encouraged participants to explore different perspectives and reflect on their own biases. At first, some teachers were skeptical, worried that these workshops would be time-consuming or too theoretical. But as the sessions progressed, they began to see the value. Conversations became deeper, and relationships among staff improved. The students, too, responded positively. Friendships began to form across previously rigid social groups, and the hallways felt more welcoming and vibrant. Aisha also organized student-led initiatives, such as Culture Week, where students celebrated their heritage through art, music, and storytelling. The event became one of the highlights of the school year, with children proudly sharing their traditions and learning from one another. Zoe participated eagerly, helping to decorate her classroom with colorful posters about African culture. On the final day of Culture Week, she stood at the front of the room, presenting a story about Nigerian folklore to her classmates. As Aisha watched from the back of the room, her heart swelled with pride. Zoe was flourishing, not just academically but emotionally, and Aisha knew that the changes she had implemented were making a difference. As the months went by, Aisha's leadership style earned the trust and admiration of the teachers. She made it a priority to empower them, giving them the freedom to innovate in their classrooms while providing the support they needed to succeed. "I want you to feel confident in trying new things," Aisha told her staff during a faculty meeting. "If something doesn't work, that's okay. We'll learn from it and grow together." This approach sparked a wave of creativity among the teachers. Some introduced project-based learning activities, while others developed new ways to engage students through art and technology. Aisha's willingness to embrace new ideas created a sense of excitement and possibility throughout the school. One teacher, Mrs. Green, shared her experience during a staff meeting. "This is the first time in years I've felt inspired to try something new," she said with a smile. "Aisha's support has made all the difference." Her words were met with nods of agreement from other teachers. Aisha's leadership wasn't just about policies, it was about empowering people to bring their best selves to the table. Aisha also knew that building a strong school community required the involvement of parents. She made it a priority to engage them as active partners in their children's education. Instead of relying solely on traditional PTA meetings, Aisha hosted informal gatherings like Coffee with the Principal, where parents could meet her in a relaxed setting and share their ideas and concerns. These gatherings quickly became popular, fostering a sense of connection between parents and the school. Even parents who had previously felt disconnected began to participate more actively, volunteering for events and supporting school initiatives. One morning, during one of these coffee gatherings, Karen timidly raised her hand to speak. She had been attending more frequently, sitting quietly on the sidelines, absorbing the change in the school's atmosphere. "I just wanted to say," Karen began hesitantly, "that I appreciate everything you've done for the school, Aisha. It's been a learning experience for me, and I'm grateful." Aisha smiled warmly, her eyes filled with kindness. "Thank you, Karen," she replied. "We're all learning together, and I'm glad to have you as part of this journey." The impact of Aisha's leadership extended far beyond the walls of the school. The sense of unity and purpose she fostered began to ripple outward into the broader community. Families from different backgrounds connected in new ways, attending school events and supporting one another. The mentorship program Aisha had introduced became a model for other schools in the district. News of the program's success spread, and neighboring schools reached out to Aisha for guidance on how to implement similar initiatives. Zoe, now thriving both socially and academically, proudly told anyone who would listen about the changes her mom had made. "My mom makes this school better for everyone," she would say with a big grin. "She makes sure everyone belongs." Toward the end of the school year, the staff and students organized a surprise assembly to honor Aisha's contributions. The auditorium was filled with students, teachers, and parents, all eager to express their gratitude. When Aisha entered the room, the crowd erupted into applause. The students had made a banner that read, "Thank you, Principal Thompson, for making our school a better place." Zoe stood proudly at the front of the room, holding a bouquet of flowers for her mom. As Aisha approached the stage, tears welled in her eyes. She had taken on this role with the hope of making a difference, but the outpouring of love and appreciation from the community was beyond anything she had imagined. "Thank you," Aisha said, her voice filled with emotion as she addressed the crowd. "This isn't just my success, it's ours. Every one of you has played a part in making this school the wonderful place it is today. I'm honored to be part of this community, and I look forward to all the amazing things we'll achieve together." The audience erupted into cheers, the sound filling the room with joy and hope. As the assembly ended and Aisha hugged Zoe tightly, she reflected on how far they had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every challenge. Together, they had not only overcome prejudice, but had also built something beautiful, a school where every child, teacher, and parent felt they belonged. Aisha knew that the work was never truly finished. There would always be new challenges to face and lessons to learn, but she was ready. With Zoe by her side and a community united in purpose, Aisha was confident that the best was yet to come. The end of the school year arrived faster than Aisha had expected, and with it came a sense of both accomplishment and reflection. The school had undergone a remarkable transformation, not just in policies and programs, but in the relationships that defined it. The parents, teachers, and students now saw themselves as part of a shared community, one that valued empathy, understanding, and growth. Yet the story wasn't quite finished. One of the final events of the year was a celebratory outdoor gathering, a picnic where students and parents could relax, reflect on the year, and enjoy time together. As Aisha walked around the school field, greeting families and watching children play, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. But there was one conversation she knew she still had to have, a conversation with Karen. Karen stood near the edge of the field, watching the festivities from a distance. She looked out of place, fidgeting with her hands as if unsure whether she belonged. Aisha noticed her hesitation and decided that now was the right time. With a calm smile, Aisha approached Karen, her footsteps light on the grass. "Hey, Karen," she greeted warmly. Karen turned, visibly startled, but managed a small, nervous smile. "Oh, hi, Aisha," she mumbled, shifting awkwardly. Aisha stood beside her, both women looking out at the children laughing and playing on the field. For a moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "I've been thinking a lot," Karen began softly, breaking the silence. "About everything, about how I acted." Aisha nodded but didn't interrupt, allowing Karen the space to express herself. "I was so caught up in my own world," Karen continued, her voice tinged with regret. "I thought I had to protect something, this idea of what the school and community should be. But I see now that I was wrong." Karen glanced down at her hands, her usual bravado replaced by vulnerability. "I was trying to hold on to control, and in doing that I hurt people. I hurt you and Zoe. Aisha listened quietly, her heart softening at the honesty in Karen's words. She could see that Karen was genuinely trying to change, and she knew how difficult it could be to admit fault. Karen looked up, meeting Aisha's gaze for the first time. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, truly. And I know that words aren't enough, but I want to do better. Aisha gave a small, understanding smile. Apologies are a good start, Karen, she said gently. What matters now is what you do going forward. Karen nodded slowly, absorbing Aisha's words. I'll do better, she promised, her voice steady. For the community, and for myself. Aisha reached out and gave Karen's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. That's all anyone can ask. As they stood there together, the tension between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by a sense of possibility. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Life rarely offers those, but it was a step in the right direction. Karen had taken her first real step toward growth, and Aisha had offered her the chance to walk that path without judgment. The sound of children's laughter filled the air as the sun began to set over the field. Families gathered around picnic blankets, sharing food and stories, while teachers mingled with parents. Aisha watched as Zoe ran across the grass with her friends, her face lit with joy and freedom. Zoe spotted her mother and ran over, out of breath but beaming. Mom, did you see me? I climbed all the way to the top of the jungle gym. Aisha laughed and scooped Zoe into a warm hug. I saw, baby. You're amazing. Karen watched the interaction with a small smile, clearly moved by the bond between Aisha and Zoe. For the first time, she saw Aisha not as someone to judge, but as a mother, just like her, doing her best to raise her child with love and strength. Zoe, Karen said softly, kneeling down to the child's level. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for how I acted before. I wasn't very kind. Zoe blinked, processing Karen's words. Then, with the simple wisdom of a child, she smiled. It's okay. My mom says we all have to try to be better. Karen chuckled, glancing up at Aisha, who gave her an approving nod. Your mom's a smart lady, Karen said warmly. Zoe grinned. She's the best principal ever. Aisha laughed, the sound light and full of hope. In that moment, surrounded by her daughter, the community, and even Karen, Aisha knew they had come full circle. As the evening drew to a close, families began packing up their picnic blankets and saying their goodbyes. Aisha stood at the edge of the field, watching as the last few children ran off toward their parents. Karen gave her a small wave as she left with her family, a look of gratitude in her eyes. It wasn't a perfect ending. There would always be more challenges to face, more lessons to learn. But Aisha had created something meaningful here, and she knew the impact would last far beyond this school year. Zoe tugged on her hand, pulling her out of her thoughts. Mom, can we come back next year? Aisha smiled, squeezing Zoe's hand. Of course, baby. This is our school now. Together they walked across the field, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. It was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a journey marked not by perfection, but by progress, resilience, and love. As Aisha looked around at the community she had helped shape, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. This journey had not just been about overcoming prejudice, it had been about transformation, about growth, and about choosing kindness even when it wasn't easy. She knew that there would always be people like Karen in the world, people who judged without knowing, who feared what they didn't understand. But Aisha also knew that people were capable of change, and that knowledge was enough to keep her moving forward, one step at a time. With Zoe by her side and a school community united in purpose, Aisha felt ready for whatever came next. The real work had only just begun, but she was prepared to face it, with kindness, with strength, and with the unwavering belief that everyone, given the chance, could grow. Come on, baby, Aisha said, leading Zoe toward the parking lot. Let's go home. And as they walked away, hand in hand, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in soft golden light. a reminder that even in the face of darkness, new beginnings were always within reach.